Okay, guys, welcome to the latest episode of the podcast. Today we have Andy Morant on. For those that don't know Andy, he will be far better positioned to give you a potted summary of him than I will. So, firstly, hello, Andy. And secondly, tell us about Andy.
Well, what before Rise or after Rise?
Yeah, let's start with before we first met you.
Before I was pretty not happy with myself, physically, mentally either. Wasn't really in a great place. And just like it's just one day I was just like, I can't carry on like this. So just like overweight, just binge drinking, eating too much, just trying to make yourself feel better through things that probably are not the best things to do, really. So I decided to do something about it, try and lose some of the weight and get back to the way I used to be a few years ago. So I decided to. I'd heard of Rise, well, the academy as it was then. I heard of Rise through a friend of mine a few years ago, and he decided to look into it. And signed up. Went to one of the meetings. Signed up there and then. I just knuckled down really and got on with it.
Awesome. So you mentioned then obviously those preceding few years before we first met you, not been in a position that you were happy with. So prior to that, had generally you been of a weight and a fitness level and energy level that you'd wanted to be, and was it just the last few years that perhaps weren't quite there?
Well, to be fair, like over the last few years, probably about the last 5 or 6, I've not been like in a great mental place. Like self-esteem issues, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been going on for a while. That's obviously been going on for quite some time. So and it was doing no good to myself at all, really. So I just wanted to get back to where I used to be, like, I don't know, probably not so much like in my early 20s, but something a little bit like that. Going out and doing loads of walking, all that kind of stuff. It's like probably looking after myself a lot better, really.
Yeah. So you generally in your early 20s you were fairly fit then, and it's just been the last sort of handful or so years that not been where you want to be.
Yes, but right. Loads of things like work issues, that kind of stuff, and it all just comes. It just gets on. It just got on top of me, really. But not realizing that it was doing that. Do you know what I mean? Sort of, going to the pub every night, probably drinking about 5 or 6 pints, or if not more, and then going having a takeaway. But that was every night as well, every single night, which obviously just is no good for anybody, really. So, I've got that's to knock that on the head.
Yeah, it's a difficult cycle, isn't it? Because I mean, it's human nature to want to make ourselves feel better. A very high proportion of the decisions we make on a daily basis are in some ways designed to make us feel better, and that's fine. That's kind of how we've evolved. That's part of who we are. Yeah. But then sometimes we start to make those decisions that they make us feel better short term, but then they make us feel slightly worse longer term, and then we do something else similar to make us feel a bit better. We feel a bit better, but then we feel a little bit worse again. And as you said there, gradually over time, all of a sudden you realise that you've taken a number of steps backwards, shall we say, in both physicality but also mentally there. And it's a hard thing to really realise it's happening, isn't it? Because it's so gradual.
For sure, yeah, that's it. It creeps up on you. It's just like, if you have like one, say, like, for argument's sake, you normally have like one beer of an evening, and then slowly over time, one beer becomes 2. So you think, you had a shit day at work. So you think, well, okay, so I'll have an extra beer. So then 3 turns into 4. And next thing you know, you're drinking like 6 or 7 beers a night.
Yeah.
And it creeps up on you. You just really have to be aware.
Yeah, and then it's a cumulative effect of that, because obviously, one night of 6 or 7 beers and a takeaway will do essentially nothing. It might you might gain a few hundred grams in body fat, but really it'll essentially nothing. But cumulative effect after months and years, as you said, of that, and you find yourself in a position perhaps where you don't want to be. Had you tried anything else to make some of those changes before we first met you?
No, not really. No, it was just an instant. I was just sat on the end of my bed one morning, and I couldn't. I said to you before, I couldn't bend over and put my socks on because my belly was too big. Yeah, and I'm just like, I've never ever been this big. It's sort of, it was a bit of a wake up call, really. So I was just like, it just made an instantaneous decision just to get sorted out because I couldn't carry on like that, you know. And it's like I would say it's quite a big decision because that's quite a life changing sort of thing. You know, it's like saying, I'm going to sit down. I'm not going to eat takeaways every day. I'm not going to go out and like have a few beers of an every evening. I'm going to start looking after myself, like eating properly. That's, you know, they're really big decisions to make for me anyway.
Yeah,
because it's actually just sitting down and you're taking stock of the situation and you've got to act on it.
It's interesting often hearing people's, they often, not always, but often have that one particular moment that they look back on. Either they see a photo of themselves on holiday or a specific thing, like you mentioned there, putting your shoes on or climbing the stairs, where all of a sudden they realise, actually, this has gone too far now. And it's always interests me kind of where that point is for different people, because often that point is probably a lot further down the line than we might have thought it would get to years ago. You know, like if you ask 20-year-old anyone, kind of what position would you have to get into mentally and physically before you decide to make a change, would probably define it as something actually that we go quite a bit past in the end before. And then that point is different for different people. For some people, it's, you know, not as far down a certain journey. It's an amount of weight or an amount of physical difference. For some people, it's several stone or whatever else more. But often there is that one particular point where we just think, right, this has gone too far, I think is often the expression that we put behind it. Who was it you knew who already came? Remind me.
Sorry, John, I didn't catch that.
Who was it you knew that was already a member or had been a member?
Oh, Joe Tierney.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, quite a few people have joined off the back of Joe. I think a combination of the great results that she had and also the fact that she's just friendly and a lot of people know her and have seen that progress. Cool. So you came then in for your briefing meeting. What was your experience of walking in for the first time?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I was pretty apprehensive, just because I didn't really know what to expect. It was just like made the decision. Like pretty no matter what would have happened, I would have joined anyway, really, because I just needed to. But it was pretty cool actually. Like she gave the talk beforehand, and like pretty much I didn't have any questions really because you covered everything really, really well. And it was just sort of like, okay, he explained everything. I was just like, yep, just sign me up. But it was. I was apprehensive at first, but quickly my mind just pretty much set at ease, really. And everybody there was for exactly the same reason. You know, they wanted to make themselves like feel better about themselves, like change some things in their life, and probably just actually like realizing they need to change something, and this is probably going to be the best way to do it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really powerful thing for people when they realise that everyone there is give or take on the same journey. There might be different specifics. It might be a different amount of weight loss, or it might mean something different to them in their life. But ultimately, we're all there for a similar reason. We're looking to make a change, both usually physically and mentally, because we've got to a point perhaps that we're not quite happy with.
Yeah.
And as I say, in most of the podcasts, to me, it's a real shame that most facilities or gyms or coaches or whatever aren't able to get that across as well, because I know how intimidating most of the fitness industry is to the majority of the people who, in theory, they're there to help.
Yeah.
And from being friends with many of them, I know actually they're all perfectly nice people. They're not perhaps what they are first perceived to be, but they're just perhaps not all that aware that that's how they are perceived by the majority of the population. Cool. So you got started there. Did Jill join at the same time as you, or was she a month later? I can't remember now.
No, Jill joined about a month later.
Yeah.
Just purely for the reason that she couldn't. She was at work and she couldn't make the meeting. But actually, it wasn't even a month. I think it was only a couple of weeks.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just a couple of weeks. And like she saw like I was going to do something about it. She felt the same way, but she, like, Jill being Jill, she didn't quite know how to do it.
Yeah.
So she saw that I was doing it. It's like, and she saw that I was being proactive about like making changes, and she wanted to join as well, and actually do it with me.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that definitely helps. When you're on the same page, I think a lot of people do struggle with when they try and make changes, whether it be something like what we do or something else, and either their other half or other people in their life perhaps aren't on board or on the same page. It does definitely make it a lot more difficult.
Oh yeah, yeah. I couldn't imagine doing it without Jill. It's purely for the diet aspects and everything, because I do all the cooking at home and that. So it would have made life a little bit trickier, to be fair.
Yeah, 100%. And ultimately, things people don't necessarily need to eat exactly the same way, but I think it's definitely key that, like, people come to me and say, oh, they've tried things in the past and it's involved them cooking a completely different meal for them as compared to their other half and kids or whoever else. And whilst it might be that a slight variation or a substitution or a different portion size might be part of their approach, cooking it 2 or 3 or more separate meals is never a long-term solution that's going to work for anyone.
It's really not. No, definitely not there. So all we had to do is, obviously, because Jill's a lot smaller than me, it's just portion control, really. Yeah. We had the same things: low fat stuff, low carb stuff. Just getting the vitamins and all the rest of it. But yeah, just cutting down on the portion sizes, really. So really wasn't an issue, to be fair. And she cut out snacks and stuff like that. Not that I know you don't actually need to do that, but just kept watching how many calories you're consuming. It wasn't that difficult, to be fair. It really wasn't hard.
I think once you get your head in the right place, the actual things that you might change don't have to be difficult. And I think often we've got in our head that they are. It's this big thing and it's going to require time and effort. And even at the very most basic level, unless someone's eating something that's actually bad for them, which they're probably not realistically, just cutting portion size is by definition marginally less effort. There's no way that eating a bit less food could be actual more effort. I get that there's the mental challenge to it and maybe the frustration related to it, but from actual time and energy and effort perspective, eating a slightly smaller portion can't be more than eating a bigger portion.
No.
I think Jill's definitely got the challenge there. Like I said, she is small, isn't she? So her maintenance calories are fairly low, and therefore it's very easy to, if she's eating the same portions as you, that over months and years adds up to quite an extra surplus, definitely.
Oh, massive. I mean, our portions before we started were absolutely ridiculous. It's like you got a plate, but you don't actually have to fill it all the way up, so it's overflowing.
Yeah, 100%. So you guys started to make the changes to your food side of it. You started to get into the workouts. How did you find the sessions?
I'm not going to lie, they were extremely difficult to start off with, but that's because I've been like pretty much just sat on my backside for how many years and not actually doing anything at all. So that part of it was never going to be easy to start off with. But over the first few weeks and months, it got a lot easier. And I didn't enjoy it, first of all, because it was really hard, and it was like I remember the day after our first ever workout. Oh my word, I was in absolutely excruciating pain because I was asking my body to do things it hadn't done for years. But yeah, as soon as you get over it, I went back the next day. It was like feeling really, really sore and stiff. But as soon as I got into did it again the following day, it sort of worked itself out and it was okay.
Do you know why you were so sore, Andy?
Right, just purely because I hadn't done anything for
it. It's because you're a guy, and us guys never listen to our suggestions in the first few weeks that we take it easy. Yeah. We always say go at 30 or 40% of your maximum. So we don't want you to feel this excessively tomorrow. And then I'm exactly the same. You kind of look over and see someone else doing something. You think, well, I think I'm probably as fit as him. I should do that version, or we don't want to stop outside of the set rest period. We say right from the start that there are set rest periods, but you can stop and rest anytime you like and then join in again. Most women listen to that fairly well. Most guys like us just don't. We're like, there's only 20 more seconds and it's only an extra 2 kilos, and we do that, and then, like you said, struggle to walk the next day.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, because myself and Jill, we don't drive, so we walk everywhere. It took us a walk that normally takes us about 15 minutes. Took us about 35 minutes to walk home from the first session. I'll
And it's
never forget
definitely,
that.
and that's part of our reason, as I've mentioned many times on this podcast and in blogs and stuff, part of our reason for doing an 8-week thing to start with. Because I find, most places do a free session or a free week, and it's just the right amount to put people off. If you do one session,
Yeah,
most people are going to be really sore the next day. Because despite what a coach says, most people will probably do a bit more than perhaps was advisable. They'll be sore. They won't look and feel any different. They'll be a bit confused about the food side of it and everything else, and they'll just think, "This isn't for me." We
yeah,
don't think fundamentally that I couldn't do it or whatever. We just think, "Oh, it's not for me. I'm busy. I haven't got time for this. It's not. This is not the right thing." After 4, 6, 8 weeks, we are feeling the workouts, but not in a can't walk the next day sort of perspective.
yeah.
We've got our heads around it. We know what's going on. We look and feel substantially different, and then hopefully at that point, we want to carry on.
Absolutely. I mean, the first couple of weeks, as soon as you started noticing differences in like your body, the way you felt about like the way you carry yourself as well. It was just like, this is great. I'm just going to keep going. It's just like, just for the first couple of weeks, it's a real eye opener. So you actually
Definitely,
feel like how different you feel about yourself.
Well, that was kind of what one of the next questions is going to be, because you've mentioned both within this podcast already and several times in other places that, as well as the physical change for you, a massive part of it was the mental side of it.
Yeah.
So you've started to answer that already, but how did you find that changed over those first few weeks and months?
Not first, straight away. I mean, like I said, you do notice, like I said, you do notice differences, and I had really, really low sense of self-esteem. I didn't really talk about that very often, but yeah, once you start to notice changes, you just start feeling like you actually feel like a lot better about yourself because you're actually doing it. You're doing it yourself. It's something that you're doing it yourself, and it's tangible.
Yeah.
Like your waistline, for instance, you start feeling like your trousers are feeling a little bit looser. You can get into that t-shirt that you couldn't wear for years and years, but like you've always wanted to get back into it, but you couldn't. And it's that kind of thing. You think it makes you feel very good about yourself because it's something that you've achieved yourself. Well, you've obviously through help with you guys, but it's you that's actually
You've
doing
done it. You've done all that stuff. We might give you a bit of support and direction, but the actual doing comes 100% from the member, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned there about your self-esteem. That's something that I find the older I get, the more I can see. So, to give you a prime example, my two older sons, Ollie and Jamie. Ollie is one of the youngest in the school year, and has always been very low in confidence. Now, it's hard to know if this is actually the reason, but when he first started at school, he was definitely one of the smaller, generally less able ones. And I think that has formed in him something of a perception of himself that we're hopefully changing and progressing over time. But his general assumption is that he kind of can't do something, and then
Yeah,
it's very easy to see evidence of that and then to build that continued self-image. Conversely, Jamie, my second son, is the second oldest in his year, and from day one was kind of the biggest, fastest, strongest, most intelligent. Now, probably 5 years later now, probably actually that's no longer the case, but his confidence level is he just assumes he's going to win everything. He assumes he's going to win all the races. He assumes he's going to get the top mark in the class.
yeah,
And at least in part because of that then becomes that degree of self-fulfilling prophecy, and he generally does do well. And over years and years, again, that's building confidence in him, and it's really interesting to see in that very small sample size. And you can imagine that extrapolated over a few more decades can be why people get to our age and be in very different positions with that.
yeah, definitely.
But then, like you said, ultimately the only way to build self-confidence is to have positive experiences, to do things and them go well. What would you say to anyone out there who perhaps struggles with confidence and self-image and that sort of stuff in terms of how to start to make changes to that?
Um, I would say don't set your goals too high to start off with.
Yeah.
Obviously, give yourself a goal, but don't make it completely like out of reach, because that's just going to have a massive detrimental effect to what you're trying to achieve. So don't set your goals too high. Like, obviously, give yourself a challenge, but not one that's just completely insurmountable.
Yeah.
And just like do something to achieve. It's just one achievement at a time. Just like set yourself little goals, I would say. And each one, each one that you achieve, it's going to bring you up a little bit more until hopefully. Sorry, come on, John.
No, I think you're entirely right there. I think sometimes we're tempted to have these massive goals, which are great in some ways because they generate a bit of enthusiasm in us. But then, as you said there, it could often be setting us up for that perceived failure. But a really easy way to still get there is exactly what you said, just break it down into smaller steps. So if we want to lose £50, well, losing £50, essentially, if that's our only goal, we have to wake up every morning and go, am I £50 lighter? No, I'm not. And it's almost that we feel we've failed every single day until we either do eventually get there or more likely get put off by that perceived failure.
Yeah.
If instead our goal is to lose that next pound or to do the processes that will over time lead to it, to get in X amount of workouts per week or eat in a certain way, they're things that we can do on a daily basis that build confidence, build momentum, that we can feel is doing something, and then over time it does eventually become that bigger goal.
That's it. I mean, after the 8-week challenge, I took a look at myself, which is the before and after photos, and I was just like, I can't believe I've actually managed to do that in 8 weeks. It was like, wow, I can do something. If I set my mind to do something, it's completely possible to do, and that did wonders for me. Absolutely massive wonders for my well-being, like my mental health, my well-being, that kind of thing. Because you're losing weight, but you don't actually appreciate how much you've actually lost until you take stock of it at the end of the 8 weeks and you look at the before and the after photos and you're just like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, definitely. I find those holding those models of the body fat at the end as well is a powerful one, isn't it?
Sure, God, yeah. Those things are mad.
Yeah, when you realise you were carrying around 4 of those big things across your body, not just from a purely weight perspective, but actually what a difference that must have made to the shape of your body. It's mad when you pick them up, and I think people are often surprised. They ask how much is this, thinking that's going to be like a stone's worth of body fat, the model that we use in the photos, and when it's only £5, it's quite eye-opening.
Totally, yeah. It's like no wonder your joints are hurting so much. You're carrying around that kind of weight.
I find those models work well in 2 ways. So firstly, when we've lost weight, it can be really powerful to make us really realise how good that is. So, people sometimes come in and go, oh, I've only lost a pound. Like only losing a pound is a bad thing. And I'll hold up the pound model of body fat, which if anyone's not seen it, it's about probably marginally bigger than the average coffee cup. So even that in itself, it's like bigger than a clenched fist. You think, wow, I've lost that amount off me. The £5 one is about the size of your forearm, probably slightly bigger than that, to be honest. And it gives you that motivation. So whether it's the £20 lost, you go, wow, that's amazing, I've lost that. Or it's a lower number that you might choose to see as not good, but then you look at it and go, oh, that's amazing. And then conversely, sometimes people think they've gained a bit of weight and they go, oh, it's only a couple of pounds, or it's only £5, but then they'll see that model and think, actually, that's quite a significant change. Cool. So that was your first couple of months. What then happened after that? So what's been the story of the remainder of your time with us?
Well, she's been going for. It must be. Was it a year and a half now, something like that, John? I think, isn't it?
I'd say it's closer to 2. I think, isn't it?
Is it 2 years? Wow.
This summer, roughly, it'll be 2, will it?
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, actually. Yeah. Well, I've been doing at least about 3 or 4 sessions a week. I haven't done recently because of an arm injury. but see, I took up running during the first lockdown. Took up running, found I'm actually quite good at running,
Yeah.
which is something I would never have actually appreciate. That I'd never have thought about doing until I started with a rise. Obviously because we're doing the online sessions and things like that, and not getting my step count, because I normally do at work between 10 and 16,000 steps a day at work, which I couldn't do that, so I needed to fill that up with something. So yeah, took up running, cut down on. It was quite difficult to do during lockdown, because everyone was going on the lash every day pretty much, because they were, as just out of sheer boredom.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends did. I didn't really want to go down that route. So it was, yeah. I mean, so doing 3 or 4 sessions a week. We did the all the Rise online sessions, the big hour-long things that you organised, John, which that was brilliant fun. Getting the medals through the post and all that. That was great.
Yeah, that's cool, isn't it?
Yeah. And I can't believe how many people jumped on that as well. That was amazing.
Oh, awesome.
But yeah, it's one thing Rise has actually sort of like instilled in me is that for self-discipline, really. Which is something I didn't really have. It was just sort of like, I just get on the lash or whatever, and I worry about it in the morning, sort of thing, you know. So yeah, that's like, it's instilled some self-discipline in me. I'm actually aware of what I'm actually putting into my body now, as opposed to just stuffing your face with just crap food and just drinking too much all the time. So that's a big one. That was a big one for me there. Yeah, so I was doing the photo shoot as well. That was like watching doing the photo shoot that you guys organised as well. That was pretty eye opening as well. I'd be stood there in all my gym gear, and I'd like actually seeing how thin I'd got, really.
Yeah, that made a substantial. You could really see the difference there between your start picture. And funny enough, actually, I've just had a quick look in the group to check when it is you started. So it was exactly 22 months ago. So the 29th of May 2019, I posted the welcome post. You'd have started properly the following Monday, but 22 months ago today was when you joined up. And I can see your before picture here, and you look significantly different now. Significantly.
I know, it's like massive, great squirrel cheeks going on. The first picture we took when I actually joined that day.
It is funny when you see someone regularly, like me seeing you, and obviously when you see yourself every single day, like you would, then it's easy to forget sometimes that level of change, isn't it? Until you look at a picture like that, and it's so apparent.
I know, that was incredible. That the photo taken, everything you posted them up was like, that cannot possibly be me.
So you've mentioned there, obviously, to a degree, how you found this last year with the lockdowns and some of the choices that you made there. How do you think you'd have found this last year if you hadn't have made the changes that you made starting 22 months ago?
I'd have been in a really worse position than I would have been if I hadn't been in a Rise mentally as well. I mean, quite possible I wouldn't have made it, you know. But I was towards the end of lockdown, I was really struggling with my mental health. I was really struggling with that, to be fair. So even if I didn't have Rise, like the kind of things that we put in place, sort of thing, you know, like watching what you eat and that kind of stuff, and like getting as much exercise as you can, I don't think I probably would have made it, to be honest with you. I would have seriously struggled towards the end. Just think how worse it could have been if I hadn't actually made like the right decisions. And but when it comes to like the healthy option, as it were, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people have struggled through lockdown with their own mental health, and all the rest of it. And they poison. So go on, John. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's easy to forget kind of the benefit of making better choices than you perhaps would have or could have under different circumstances. So, some members have said to me that they feel really embarrassed because they've gained £5 or whatever in the last year, where they've then seen other members have lost a stone or two. And my comment to that is always, I'm fairly confident you would have gained more than £5 in this last year if you weren't doing what we do with you. If
Absolutely.
however shit you feel, however much your mental health has suffered in the last year, I would like to think, and this sounds bad in some ways, but it would have been even worse without those choices that they'd made, without the workouts on top. I know that I feel
Oh.
worse after only a couple of days of missing workouts and eating less well. If I went a full year of doing with that, well, to be honest, I don't know if I would. Again, similar to what you were saying there, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could survive and keep going without what looking after yourself then brings to you, even if sometimes it is just maintenance or if it's just damage limitation, when
Yeah.
it could have been much more severe damage.
So, like you were saying, John, like it's doing something is better than doing nothing at all.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like if someone put on £5 over a year, I think that's pretty decent, to be honest with you. If you've only put on £5 over the course of a year, that's not too shabby, really. I mean, you can quite. I mean, like £5. It's not easy to lose weight, but it's a lot easier.
Relatively quick to undo, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, so half. I think towards the end of my 8 weeks, no, I think it was a bit further on. I put on a little bit of weight, like a few pounds, but I managed to lose that in about a week and a half. So I was back to where I was. So it wasn't too bad.
I think the human brain is very good at picking out the perceived, because often they are only perceived negatives. I think it's the sort of thing that it served us well for millions of, or how many hundreds of thousands of years. The human brain's great at noticing danger and difficulty. It protected us when a saber-toothed tiger came lunging out of the jungle and all that. But then, we've got very different lives now to what we did back then. And actually, that ability for the brain to so quickly focus on these perceived negatives, I think doesn't actually serve us all that well a lot of time. And we almost have to make ourselves do the opposite. We have to train our brains to see the positives, to see the progress, or to see the value in maintenance or damage limitation when it could have been something different. But only this morning I got a message from one person saying that they'd only lost £4 in the last month and it was pathetic. And I was like, you've lost £4. You've probably, and it's not a competition, but to have lost £4 in the last month, it probably puts you in the top 10% of progress of the population, because most people would have gained a little bit. Some maybe have lost a bit more. And again, it's not a competition, doesn't really matter, but only £4 to me, I was like, that's an amazing result. But in that person's head, they'd wanted 10 over that same time frame, so they weren't seeing the £4 forward progress. They were seeing that perceived £6 of shortfall.
Yeah. Well, it's like you were saying, like I was saying earlier about goals. Like, set yourself little goals. Don't just, don't just expect to make an insurmountable goal and give you a ridiculous time limit to do it in. I thought £4 in a month that's brilliant.
That's amazing. I think it's almost like if coming 8th at the Olympics, behind the 7 fastest people in the world, that's still amazing. It's like, just because somebody else is doing what you could describe as a bigger result doesn't diminish our own result. And I think so much more, the older I get, the more I realise we do have to make that conscious effort to remind ourselves of the value of different things and of the goodness in our lives. I'm doing a daily post at the moment, a gratitude appreciation post, and there's so much stuff that our brain just forgets about instantly. Like, the vast majority of our day probably goes okay. Most of the conversations we have at work, most of the things we try and do go fine, but if we don't make an effort, at the end of the day, all we remember is the report we didn't get in, or that awkward conversation we had, or the person that said something to us, even though that was probably 1 or 10% of the day compared to the majority that went okay. But our brain just forgets about
the worst.
Yeah, it does. I think we just it's about expectations. Like, we have an expectation something will go a certain way. It goes that way. We forget about it. We move straight on to the next thing. That's what I wanted to happen. That's what I knew was going to happen. Job done. Move on. it doesn't go according to expectation in some way. It just sticks in our brain, circulates, unless we make that conscious effort to change that.
It's like our brains are conditioned to beat ourselves up about the most ridiculous things.
Yeah. And it's a fine balance, I find, because like obviously you want to make changes in some areas of your life, and that's great. But there's a balance between doing that, but then doing it in a way that turns to, like you said, beating yourself up over the shortfall. And I think a massive key is what you said earlier about those little steps, because you can always make those little steps. You can build confidence, you can build momentum, you can feel that you're succeeding, and then over time those bigger goals come. There might be a 2-step forward, 1 step back, but still general positive direction. It's funny, the human brain, funny.
Yes. I mean, going back about finding faults in things. I mean, every year I always write a summary of the year on Facebook, around about New Year's Eve time. And this year it was obviously had the year just gone was just the most horrific year probably most of us will ever see. But I took all the fine points. So I looked back throughout the year of everything that's happened, and I picked out all the good bits, and I made a list. There's amazing things that happened last year. Absolutely, like for myself and for other people as well. Absolutely incredible things happened last year. But everyone's just going to think about lockdown and COVID and how bad everything was. When it's actual fact, there were some really good things that happened personally for me last year. Things that I'd achieved that I wouldn't have thought I'd ever do, like taking up running for one, that kind of thing. So it's like the human brain. It's just conditioned just to like you said, just to look on the negative of things, and you just sit back and take stock, and just think, well, like take all the good things out. You're sure you'll have a massive list, and it'll probably be a lot bigger than the list you'd make of all the negative things that have happened.
I do that with the elite program that we run every quarter. I get everyone to write down, firstly, all the stuff that went less well in the last quarter, and then all the stuff that went well, that they were happy with and pleased with. And you can see them, pen goes to paper instantly for the stuff that goes less well. They're scribbling away, but you run out of steam after like a minute. You come up with 3, 5, 7 things that went less well. The stuff that went well, we really struggle with it. We're there looking around, looking at the ceiling for inspiration, looking at our pen, and then we think of something, and then we think of something else, and then we start to check our phone. I say flick back through your Facebook feed, that'll give you a good indicator.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
all of a sudden, before we know it, we've got 20 or 30 things that actually went pretty well and that we were happy with. And when you put those two lists side by side, you think, actually, what I thought was a rubbish month or year or quarter was actually all right. It might not have been the best one of my life. I don't think 2020 was the best year of anyone's life, really.
Sure.
But it perhaps wasn't what I'd told myself and remembered. And I think so much of it as well is kind of the environment we put our brain in as well. So people talk a lot about willpower. You mentioned earlier, actually, a word that really rang true to me. It's I forgot what we said now. I'll come back to that in a second. But ultimately, if we're relying on willpower, it's not going to happen. We can force ourselves to behave in a certain way for only so long, but the environment that we place ourselves in and that we place our mind in is, from my experience, a bigger long-term indicator of how things will go. If we watch the news regularly and we do certain things on social media that paint a picture of the world and of our lives and make us think and feel in a certain way, you can try and resist that. If we have these WhatsApp groups with mates where they share about how bad the world is, or where where our brain is constantly exposed to how crap the world is, we'll go that way. No amount of willpower will stop us. You put me in a room with 10 miserable people, I'll soon become the 11th one. I can force myself to stop it for a while, but it'll happen. It's like getting in a sauna. We don't choose to sweat. Our body just responds to the environment it's in, and our brain does as well. It's a slower progress, but if we choose instead to put our brain in a generally more positive environment, we limit our exposure to certain negative inputs. I find engaging with the group at Rise is a big part of it as well. So people who talk to other members and us when they come in for sessions, people who engage in the group, that's almost an antidote to the negativity and the picture of the world that they'll perhaps be exposed to elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's in theory being putting them in a room full of 10 happy, positive people will hopefully make them the 11th rather than the opposite, which is what our brain normally is on the receiving end of.
That's it. I think that's one of the reasons why Rise works so well as well, to be fair. You're in a room with like-minded people, everyone's there for the same thing, and everyone's going to try and help each other out. You know, if they start feeling shit about themselves or whatever, and they don't think they may be achieving what they want to achieve, you can bounce off of each other, which I think is it's one of the really good selling points of Rise. That really good.
Yeah, awesome. So that brings us up to Andy on end of March, although it'll be April by the time anyone hears this, but end of March, early April, Andy. Anything else you think people will be interested to hear about in terms of just you in general, your past, your journey with us? Anything you think people will benefit from hearing?
Well, all I could say is just look at what Rise has done for me, really, through the last nearly 2 years. But I've come out the other side of these 2 years nearly, just like a completely changed bloke, like lifestyle wise and everything else. And if that's something you really want to do, I'd say get up and do it, give it a go, because you've got nothing to lose.
I think it's testament to you, Andy. I mean, your progress over the last 22 months has been phenomenal anyway, full stop, but particularly over what's happened over the majority of that time frame. You know, if in mid 2019 someone had said to you, Andy, there's going to be a global pandemic, you won't be able to see anyone for most of the year, you'll be furloughed, you'll be, this, that and the other. But at the end of it, you'll be slimmer, happier, healthier, have more energy than you are now.
Yeah,
you'd have probably thought they were talking nonsense. So that's an amazing testament to how well you've done.
That's it. Well, it probably wouldn't have done it without you guys as well.
It's a team effort.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've I've put the effort in, and your guys there to sort of like catch us if you're full, if you know what I mean.
Awesome. Cool. Right, guys at home, I'm sure you've got a lot from that. It was really interesting to hear your story and the things that happened to you recently, Andy. So thanks for your time, mate.
No, thanks for asking me, John. It's been really good, this.